I don't even know where it went. I don't know where it landed.
Well,
Okay.
Wait a minute. If it hits the roof, it doesn't count. Oh, wow.
I don't know what to say. What do you say after those balls?
Aaron Judge really may have redefined the home run derby.
The verdict is in. Aaron Judge guilty of destroying the 2017 Home Run Derby. How many more legal references are there? Well, we have them in perpetuity. Welcome to SI Now. It is Tuesday, July 11th. I am Maggie Gray alongside Robin Lundberg. We've been chiding baseball, Robin, for not developing their players into crossover stars. And then, hello, Aaron Judge. He won Monday's Home Run Derby. That is our adrenaline performance. It is presented by Toyota. Let's go places. Judge leads the league in home runs. Is he the player, Robin, to become mainstream like former Yankee Derek Jeter was?
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I think there are a number of factors that go into this. One, he's got the look of a physical, athletic presence. Obviously, he's taking the ball yard, as we saw last night. And then he has the Yankees stimulus package. To me, the Yankees are the engine that drives baseball, much the way Tiger Woods was for golf. I mean, baseball is a very regional sport where people root for their teams. The Yankees are the one team where they have a huge fan base, the biggest in all of baseball, and they have people who feel a certain way about them. So when you look historically, if you're naming the great baseball players of all time, of course you're naming a lot of Yankees. And even recently, if you're to say who are the faces of baseball, you're going back to all the A-Rod discussions and all the Derek Jeter discussions. But if Aaron Judge is the answer to the oft-asked who is the next face of baseball question, what does he have to do to cement that superstar status?
Well, in my opinion, he needs a postseason moment. I mean, the way that Jeter really became so famous, really before social media and that era, was because he won, 4 out of 5 World Series in his first few seasons. I mean, it's unbelievable how much success he had early on. We got very familiar with him playing all that October baseball because he was on such a dynastic team. So that's a big part of it. Still why we don't really give Mike Trout, the credit that he has earned, because we don't see him playing in the postseason very often. He doesn't have an iconic moment yet like Jeter had where the whole world is watching. Another thing about Judge, though, that I think people really love about him is, yes, the size. It's so imposing. Yet I feel like there's a reason to feel good about Judge, because I think a lot of baseball fans believe that the steroid era is basically over. Now, we saw with Chris Davis back in 2013, Jose Bautista in 2010. When these guys started hitting so many home runs, there was still this very raised eyebrow. Like, are they doing it clean? And I think the shadow of the steroid era was still over those two guys. But with Judge, it doesn't seem like there's even a thought or a hint. It feels like he's doing it clean, and that means that you can root for him without cynicism.
Well, he looks naturally athletic. I mean, he looks like somebody who just is chosen to play a professional sport, if you will. As far as what he needs to do to cement his status, for me, you talk about moments. I think last night might have been the moment. It doesn't jive with how we like to frame it because it's not counting. It doesn't really matter. But the Home Run Derby might be the biggest thing at the All-Star festivities for Major League Baseball, and there are more eyeballs on it than there are for most of their events, including some of the postseason games.
Sure.
So by doing that last night, playing for the Yankees, as I said before, the one missing ingredient is consistency. Baseball is an odd sport where you need a huge sample to believe something is real. So that's the one thing. Is it flash in the pan status if he gets hurt? Does he go through an extended slump? He keeps up this level of production on the team he's on with the look he has. He's the new face of baseball.
Yeah, agree.
Well, no one seems to care about the fate of the poor baseballs from last night.
They're meant to be hit, Robin.
But one of them wound up in the mitt of Joel Embiid. Actually, that's just his hand. Embiid seems to be everywhere. He did miss out on something that would have been a natural fit for him, though, and that's NBA Jam. SI recently ran a feature on the oral history of the arcade sensation, and I think I speak for everyone when I say we could all use even more razzle-dazzle.
Heating up. Oh, my! Oh, he's on fire! Ugly shot!
Totally realistic. From the Boom Shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka!
To Rejected.
Rejected!
The soundtrack of our childhood was shaped in part by the video game NBA Jam. Released in 1993, our own Alex Abnos and Dan Green looked back at the creation of the game and compiled an oral history. All right, guys, sports video games existed before NBA Jam, but what made this game so successful, not just in the culture, but also financially, Alex?
I mean, I think it was a bunch of things. The main thing is that it was just very loud and very in your face in a way that video games really weren't at the time, especially sports video games. It had a lot to do with that. It had a lot to do with the fact that also that this was the first game that licensed official NBA players and teams and everything.
Okay, but one very famous player, Dan, missing from this game, Michael Jordan, not a part of NBA Jam. Now, if a game was created today, NBA 2K, without LeBron in it, it would kill the credibility of the game. Why did not having MJ in this game not matter?
I think it was able to withstand that because, like Alex said, it was so novel to have all the other players in the game. MJ had the opt-out clause. He was not in things licensed by the NBA and the Players Union. So I think just seeing anyone else in the game and all these real players was kind of able to make up for it, whereas now that's such a given expectation of games that they're all licensed, that everyone's in there, that missing LeBron would be kind of killer.
Now, there are a lot of players in the game, but we all know John Stockton didn't fly through the air. So how exactly did Midway, who developed the game, make the decision to go outlandish and you know, like over the top rather than realistic? How did realistic get rejected?
I mean, we talked to all the developers. We kind of split them up between the two of us, and we never really got a totally clear answer on exactly how it happened. But it was kind of the brainchild of Mark Trammell to take these, you know, what were at the time very normal-looking dunks when they were first starting to develop the game, a very realistic gameplay. And at some point, you talk to Mark Trammell, you can talk more about this. It just became much bigger, and you know, you had the flames, you had the really high jumps and everything.
Yeah, I think it developed a little bit organically. Like they started, you know, you're spending all day messing around with the game and trying to develop things, and he started just making the dunks go a little bit higher and a little bit farther and a little bit crazier. And within the studio, they started reacting to that very positively, and so they just kept going further and further in that direction until, you know, something really crazy happened.
The reaction wasn't entirely positive. I talked to one developer that was just like, he got into the developing of the game because he really liked the NBA, and he liked the NBA players for what they were and what they could do. So once he saw that, he was just like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, we're not going to almost insult the players in this way by having them do these crazy things. I'm totally against this. No. And of course, now that's like the biggest thing. Eventually, obviously, he came around.
You mentioned Mark Trammell, one of the developers. He has a hidden character in the game. I know they put some of their fan affiliations in the game. What were some of the behind-the-scenes quirks that you guys found interesting?
Well, that was one of the things. Was Mark Trammell is from Michigan, and he's a Pistons fan, and the Pistons and Bulls were big rivals at the time. And the Midway was based in Chicago, and so he was always hearing it from Bulls fans, and this is right as the Bulls were breaking through. So he put a script in the game where if it was a close game between the Pistons and Bulls, the Bulls stats would go way down and they would shoot terribly, and the Pistons would do really well.
It's like an anti-clutch
exactly, yeah.
kind of code.
Yeah, so he said at the time no one really noticed it, but it's one of those things that I think had been kind of rumored throughout the year. So it was interesting to hear the kind of real story from him.
It's really interesting. And some of the business side of this, I mean, the impact that this game had on future sports games, Alex, what was it?
I mean, it was huge. Obviously, it was big business. It was making a ton of money. But also just in the gameplay of sports games, I was surprised to learn that I believe this was one of the first games where you had individual skill ratings for players that were visible to the player as you're selecting like which team you want to do. So you know that John Stockton has a really high steal ability, but maybe less of a dunk ability. Whereas Karl Malone, you know, their balance was perfectly reflected in their stats, and that was the case for all of the teams in NBA.
The 90s, our formative years. Why don't we stay there for a bit?
Forever.
Yeah, NBA Jam, obviously one of, if not the best video game of the 90s, but what about the best sports movies of that glorious decade? We here at SI Now put together our list via cumulative votes from the staff.
The Goonies! It's Knuckle Puck time! Just fly together!
I'm in the zone.
Really, it is one thing to embarrass me, right? It's another thing to piss these guys off that we have to play against.
We're the members of the All-American League.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
You never heard of the Sultan of SWAT? Colossus of Clout? The Great Bambino! You play ball like a girl! You heard me.
Hey, Gilmore, you suck. You eat pieces of for breakfast? The price is wrong. That's your home. Are you too good for your home? Answer me.
All right, there you have it. That was our top 5 sports movies of the 90s. Of course, we see you guys out there on Facebook already commenting. Keep them coming. All right, so this was obviously our SI Now staff. We ranked everything, came up with this 1 through 5 list. Now, personally, I was a little hurt, really hurt by the team that Cool Runnings did not make it onto this list. I mean, when they dragged the sled over the finish line, I'm crying every time. John Candy, may he rest in peace. Guys from the outside looking in, you did not vote on this list. What do you think?
Well, the big, we were just talking about Michael Jordan and the NBA, and the big movie that was left out was definitely Space Jam. I can't believe that didn't make it in the top 5.
Yeah, it's an honorable mention, just outside.
And it's also the best acting job probably ever by an athlete in a movie, like an active athlete in a movie. Not that Michael Jordan is going to win any Oscars for his performance, but the fact that he was able to do it.
Are you sure you're remembering this right?
I mean, come on.
Are you looking at this through 90s Alex's eyes?
I will also say the bar is pretty low. So.
Dan?
Yeah, I would say Space Jam would have been my first reaction too, especially because it, going with NBA Jam, there must have been something kind of in the air at the time to just kind of take basketball to these absurd places. And so they kind of partner well in that way. But yeah, Cool Runnings. Also, I remember seeing that in the theater with my dad and quoting it all the time after. And that's
Feel
one
the
that.
rhythm. Feel the ride. Get on up. It's bobsled time.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't really get the credit it deserves. And Little Giants, too, would be my other one.
So Little Giants
Good
was
one.
also one that got a lot of discussion. Robin, what do you think of this list?
I think it's pretty spot on. Like, Space Jam has a lot of references, but I wonder if it's one of those things where nostalgia is a heck of a drug. Like, if you actually watch the movie, how much you would enjoy it right now. Some of the ones that are on this list hold up really well. I mean, I think A League of Their Own is a really good film in and of itself, and I love Happy Gilmore. I was very happy to see it at number 1. And you speak of Oscars, I think Shooter McGavin could have won a Best Supporting Actor
Best
trophy
villain.
there.
Yeah, really great villain. Also, Blue Chips was not on our original list, but I always thought Blue Chips was a really good movie. We were talking about, Shaquille O'Neal was a big fan of NBA Jam. Shaquille O'Neal, obviously very memorable in that movie.
Definitely.
And Nick Nolte also. Yeah, this was a fun one. It created a lot of discussion in our office. White Men Can't Jump is also a fabulous movie that I think actually does hold up now.
Yeah, I think are they remaking that? They're doing something with that movie.
Gosh, can't we just leave the 90s
No.
in the 90s?
No, we can't. They even remade NBA Jam a ton of times too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no.
I mean, Spider-Man's been made like 6 times now.
I know people like you keep seeing it on opening day, so why wouldn't they? Very interesting. Guys, thanks for helping us reminisce about the 90s. Really appreciate it. Great job on going through the oral history of NBA Jam.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Commenting on Facebook about our 90s movies. This one came in Major League 2. All right, I have a soft spot in my heart for sequels, but even this one I did not like. I mean,
Was that
Wesley
Pedro
Snipes isn't even in it.
Serrano's breakout role. Might have been Omar Epps' breakout role.
It might have been Omar Epps. There's one memorable line where the hick kind of guy who's from the farm who makes the team goes, "I made the rooster."
Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah,
it, so
I
maybe
know,
it's not
I
that
know.
memorable.
Not that memorable.
Joe Boo doesn't remember it.
They were also no Rudy. Rudy was an honorable mention. It did make it. It was in our top 8, but didn't make the top 5. People are worried about that. Sandlot, obviously everyone loves, hands down.
I'm kind of glad Rudy didn't make it. I like how upset it makes people. Does that make me bad?
No, kind of. What do you hate the underdog, Robin? We are the underdog. How can you hate us? Mighty Ducks, we guys see out there, a League of Their Own, obviously. That's really fun. Keep them coming, obviously. We know the list isn't perfect, but we did our best. I think so. Meanwhile, Paul George, meeting his new city today, but will the All-Star be renting or buying in Oklahoma City. Our own Lee Jenkins has filed a piece about Paul George, who basically said not only did he call Kevin Durant as soon as he heard the trade was being made to ask him some advice
It's
about
like the
playing in
NBA is
OKC.
one giant group text, right?
That's how we think about it in our mind. This was also a quote that Paul George gave to our own Lee Jenkins. He says, if we have a killer season in Oklahoma, we make the conference finals or upset the Warriors or do something crazy, I'd be dumb to want to leave that. He also said that his desire to play in Los Angeles was quote unquote overblown. So let's take this first, Robin, the idea that the OKC Thunder would have to either make the conference finals or upset the Warriors for Paul George to want to stay. Do you think they'll even get that far?
I think they're a top 4 team in the West for sure. The conference finals I wouldn't go out and guarantee, but I think they're a second round team on paper at least. When they made this deal, I liked it because they didn't give up much, and you might as well take the flyer on Paul George. When it comes to LA, we keep hearing about that. I'll believe a major free agent is going to sign with the Lakers when said major free agent signs with the Lakers. Now, there's been a lot of smoke when it comes to Paul George. That's obviously coming from somewhere. These are interesting comments, though, because of how specific they are, because now that's like the benchmark for the season, right? It's basically Western Conference Finals or bust for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their fans are going to be sitting there, wait, we lost in 7 games in the second round. Does that count?
Yeah, does that mean that all of a sudden you have this emotional series, say you take it to 7 against the Rockets or something, or Minnesota, who I'm expecting to take a big step forward, and then what, Paul George is still going to leave because they didn't make the Western Conference Finals or beat the Warriors? We saw from a previous piece that Lee Jenkins had written that a lot of Western Conference GMs are saying if you can just make it out of the first round of the playoffs, well, that's a win for your team considering how good the Warriors are. So, yeah, to say that this is sort of the criteria for him to stay sets the bar very high. Now, what he said about Los Angeles was another thing, which you said you'll believe it when a free agent actually signs there. He says if basically a guy commits and then you see another guy commit and then they get something rolling, that's what he said, then that would be an attractive place to go. That's not what the Lakers are right now. Right now, the Lakers are a young team that's building from these great draft picks that they have, you know, with Brandon Ingram and now with Lonzo. So I'm really curious to see what happens in LA because there's also these sort of weird rumors that LeBron James may end up there. There's still a lot up in the air, but Paul George acknowledging in this piece that he's not all in OKC. He's hoping it goes well, but not all in. And I think this definitely leaves the door open for him to go back to go to LA, his hometown.
People make decisions for different reasons, right? Like I get the Lakers' prestige, lifestyle, a lot of that will factor into a decision like that. They have to win 16 more games this year to be 500 from where they were last year. It's going, not that it doesn't exist, but it's going to be difficult for George to find a better basketball situation than what he has in Oklahoma City. They're going to have a lot of length on the perimeter with him now in tow. Robertson there re-signing, of course. Steven Adams, a good defensive player. And, of course, Russell Westbrook. And Westbrook and George should play fairly well off of each other because George is a very good spot-up shooter, as well as he's probably at his best as the secondary creator with the ball. So I'm very interested to see just how good Oklahoma City can be.
Yeah, we had this conversation actually recently, which was, is there any good way for a superstar to leave their team?
Nope.
There's not, especially in the social media era, so many leaks, things like that. But I wonder if maybe George was playing up the idea of wanting to eventually go to his hometown because now that is something that a fan base can stomach that. You know, if a superstar says, I'm going to leave you because I want to join the Warriors, well, that's not good. But if you're going to leave to go to your hometown to try to bring that franchise back from the depths, if you can pull a LeBron James, I think the fan base says, we don't like it, but we can understand that's a reasonable excuse in our book. And maybe that's why Paul George played it up before he told Indiana that he was going to eventually leave them. Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
All right, the Lonzo effect. In full effect at NBA Summer League. That's where we find our own Ben Golliver. We head there now, courtesy of Toyota. Let's go places. Ben, even when he's on the bench, Lonzo is making news. He sat against the Kings, which feature his biggest foil and rival, De'Aaron Fox. How was that move interpreted by the basketball aficionados at Summer League?
Well, Maggie, with loud groans, and it's not all totally his fault. I mean, you look at Ben Simmons is kind of here watching but not playing. Brandon Ingram gets injured in the Lakers' first game. Markelle Fultz goes down with an ankle injury in Philadelphia's first game. So we're dropping stars like flies left and right. And so when that news hit that Lonzo wasn't going to play and we were going to kind of miss that head-to-head matchup, a lot of people were frustrated because it was certainly circled on the calendar I think people got over it by the time the game took place. I'm sure you saw the tweet that De'Aaron Fox put out, kind of slapping his head, and afterwards he was joking that he was hacked about that, and he knew the media would turn it into a story. I mean, I think there's a pretty good-natured rivalry between these two guys, but he wound up giving Lonzo a pass, saying after the game that, look, if he's hurt, he'd be silly to risk anything out there, and just take it easy because it's only Summer League. But I think big picture, this just speaks to everyone's excitement to watch Lonzo Ball play. It was an unbelievable scene this weekend. They had a record 17,500 tickets sold here. They actually sold out the night before to watch his game against the Celtics. You know, I've been a guy who's been at Summer League now for like 8-9 years. Never seen it as excited, as loud as it was during that Lakers-Celtics game. So he's a real phenomenon. Obviously, a lot goes with that. His family, his father as well. But it was kind of a bummer that he sat out yesterday.
I think it's good for the league. I mean, now you're building suspense for that De'Aaron Fox and Lonzo Ball eventual matchup, and to already have that rivalry. But when we're talking Summer League, Ben, it's the time for fans to get excited about young players, super excited even, which can lead to some pretty lofty comparisons. So I'm going to read you some comparison tweets, and you're going to tell us whether they are a swish or a brick. That guy Myers tweets in, Jason Tatum plays like Paul Pierce.
Oh, boy.
Swish or brick for Mr. Chicken Parm there?
I'm not sure it's a swish or a brick. Maybe he's rolling around the rim. Tatum's gotten a lot of positive buzz. Actually, we were joking, and people in the Boston media are already calling him a 10-time All-Star. So we're calling Jason Tatum 10-time. So that's sort of where the bar is for him in terms of hype and excitement. But the comparison with Pierce fits from the footwork standpoint. I mean, this guy loves being in the mid-post. He loves setting up turnaround jumpers going either way, left or right. He's very polished. And he had a really nice debut that kind of got people buzzing. And he also played well in Utah coming into Las Vegas in their summer league as well, which really kind of helped the hype train go. I think if you're Danny Ainge and you faced a lot of criticism or at least questioning about why do you trade that pick, why not just take the sure thing in Fultz? To me, Tatum's shown a lot of reasons why they went that direction. It was clearly a position of greater need for Boston, and I think he's going to be able to give them real minutes in year one, and that's always helpful from a rookie.
Matt Kramer tweets in, I've been really impressed with De'Aaron Fox thus far. Reminds me of John Wall, incredibly quick and shifty, getting up the floor. Swish or brick there?
I'm giving him a swish on that one. That's the comp that everybody's been making even before Summer League. You never want to put that kind of pressure on a player, but to me, it's the charisma factor. Both those guys had franchise player personalities. It might have taken a little while for John Wall to come out, but he's a real straight talker, straight shooter, gets right to the point. And, De'Aaron Fox just carries himself like a star. I mean, there's not too many guys his age who have that presence, and I think he's going to be a great leader as he grows up for that Sacramento team that really needs it. I mean, the Kings are incredible. They're basically bringing their normal regular season team here, besides the old guys they just signed, Zach Randolph and Vince Carter and George Hill. And they've got like 8 or 9 guys on their Summer League roster who are probably going to play minutes for them this season. And to see Fox right in the middle of it, orchestrating, getting up and down the court, and really breaking guys down in transition, it's fun to see. Now, they haven't actually played that well as a team, so I'd say anyone who wants to talk yourself into like the Kings making a run at the playoffs, I'd say definitely pump those brakes. Give De'Aaron Fox a few years to turn Sacramento around like John Wall turned around Washington.
He does jump off the screen for you, though, when you see him going up and down the floor. Yeah. Calvin Fuchu tweets in, Dennis Smith plays a lot like Rose when he was younger, and I like it. Swish or brick?
Yeah, maybe a little bit overstated there, but Dennis Smith has probably been the best player here at Las Vegas Summer League. The thing that I like about him the most is definitely a Derrick Rose characteristic, and that's insatiability. I mean, remember earlier in his career, Rose was just pounding guys off the dribble, play after play, possession after possession, attacking the rim, breaking defenses down, and just putting a lot of pressure on the interior of the defense. And that's what Smith does too. He also happens to have a pretty nice shot, at least he has here in Summer League. He's been pretty consistent with his outside shooting, which opens things up for him as well. I think when you're looking around at the lottery guys, like I mentioned, a bunch of them have been out injured, haven't really got the chance to show their full capabilities. Dallas is walking away with Dennis Smith. First of all, they're laughing that both New York and Chicago didn't take him, but they're also thinking that maybe they've got one of the top performing lottery picks here in Las Vegas.
Okay, so we talked about some of the bigger name stars, the Dennis Smith and Jason Tatum and De'Aaron Fox. But Ben, has there been an under the radar guy who looks like he could have an impact on the league next season?
I'm not totally sure if he's under the radar, but you go up to Toronto with Pascal Siakam, and he's a rookie last year. Now he's in his second year. He actually played minutes for Dwayne Casey, rotation minutes, and he's just been everywhere. Big time activity, front court type guy, lots of rebounding, defensive aggressiveness, and just jumping in passing lanes, deflecting passes, blocking shots. He's just one of those guys who sort of looks like, he's too good to be in Las Vegas. And there's usually some of those second-year players kind of pop out like that. To me, he's certainly fit that category. If I'm the Raptors, it's a very interesting time for their franchise, right? Because they've had all these supporting pieces go by the wayside just to make sure they can pay Kyle Lowry, pay Serge Ibaka. You need some of those young guys to step up. I think a guy like Pascal is going to be able to play real minutes for them, even bigger role than he did last year, and really help Toronto as they try to kind of stay in that top 3 mix in the East.
Okay, Ben, final one for you. This is according to ESPN's Ian Begley. Carmelo Anthony, quote unquote, confident he'll be moved from New York to Houston. Former teammate Nene posted on Instagram a photo of Melo in a Rockets uniform. So how serious of a contender would Carmelo make the Rockets if indeed he is traded to Houston?
There's been a lot of buzz about that Melo to Houston thing. It's sort of been the talk down here in Las Vegas. Both Chris Paul and James Harden kind of dropped through recently. So that makes sense why he would want to go there. I mean, there's the buddy angle and also the competition factor. You mentioned earlier when you're talking about Paul George in Oklahoma City, how the threshold for Paul George is that he really wants to win. I think that's the threshold for all these stars. I mean, think about Chris Paul. He's trying to break through to the conference finals for the first time in his entire career. You look at Carmelo Anthony, he's just been languishing in New York. I mean, that would represent a real opportunity. So to me, it makes sense on both sides. The trickiest part is just trying to move his salary. Are there pieces that New York would want to take back? But I think what we might have learned here over the last couple of days, or maybe relearned, is that the Knicks front office just doesn't know what it's doing. This Tim Hardaway Jr. contract was outrageous. If they're willing to make that offer and bring him in for $71 million or whatever it was, certainly they're willing to take on some bad contracts to move Carmelo Anthony. They're not doing so great this summer. And I think if you're Houston, it's a natural fit. You're going to have to work through the Carmelo and Mike D'Antoni dynamic. And clearly, probably some hurt feelings from their time together in New York. But that could be a really potent, explosive offense. I think he could play great minutes for them as a power forward. And to me, I think it's going to happen.
Really fun listen on the Open Floor podcast. You and Andrew Sharp theorizing that maybe Steve Mills is like the man behind the scenes who's just secretly been ruining the Knicks franchise over the last 10 years, yet Phil Jackson's getting blamed for it.
Well, surviving is a fantastic, skill. And that's something that you have to do when you lose year after year after year. So at some point, you want to point back to over the last 10 years of mistakes, who are the common denominators? And I think Steve Mills is certainly a guy who hardly ever gets any criticism. And you also should look at his boss, though, Dolan. I mean, I think sometimes a reluctance to rebuild can really lead management to some poor decisions. And I think in New York, that's sort of what he's wanted to avoid it, right? And the ironic part is they're just constantly rebuilding, even though they don't want to be. And that's a frustrating place for fans to be. And we'll see how their season turns out next year.
Love listening to you guys on the Open Floor podcast. Ben Golliver joining us from Las Vegas. Have fun, Ben. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Maggie.
All right, let's stick with this Vegas theme for a moment, shall we? Had some breaking news this morning that, of course, this big Mayweather-McGregor match happening August 26th.
That's official? That's happening?
It's happening.
All right, yeah, good.
The press conference, actually, the first of 5, I think, or 4, kicks off today in L.A., and eventually it's going to make its way all the way to London. But, okay, we find out that there was a scheduling conflict at T-Mobile Arena between the Big Three. Ice Cube's Big Three was going to have their finals, their big finale, played the same night that Mayweather-McGregor was scheduled to happen. Well, they've come to a solution. They've come to a compromise. The Big Three is going to play their final at 1 p.m., we think, earlier in the day on that same Saturday, August 26th, as the Mayweather-McGregor. You like it?
I think it's a great idea for the Big Three. I mean, because it allows you to capitalize on the hype of Mayweather and McGregor. And maybe you can get Floyd to bet on the games themselves.
Try to stop him.
Yeah, he could win and pay his taxes. And then everybody is happy.
Yeah, it's not shocking to me that headline came across that Floyd is asking for a little help from the IRS, just a little bit of a reprieve from whatever went down in 2015. Oh, that time when he made 9 figures off of one night.
I think I've seen him holding money to his ear before.
The money fund,
so,
yeah.
There's a disconnect. We don't call that money over here. Good move for the Big Three, though.
Good move for the Big Three to make a compromise here. You're right. I think it could be a big lead-in for them. I mean, their big finale, but there was never a thought in my mind that somehow the Big Three was going to stand their ground here and not try to use it to their benefit. Ice Cube's too smart for that.
I agree with that, but what this does is put them in the same conversation. Because if it had been done quietly, then no one would associate the two together. But because it wasn't, because it's put out there publicly, we're talking about it right now. So when you're thinking Mayweather and McGregor, maybe as the appetizer, you're thinking big three.
You know, the real MVP is going to be that day, the stadium crew at T-Mobile Arena trying to turn over a half-court basketball tournament into a boxing match that night.
That is going to be a day's work.
Everyone's
sure.
going to be earning their
Hopefully they get
shekels that day.
overtime.
Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. Of course, keep commenting on our top 5 sports movies from the 90s. We want to hear from you. And, of course, your memories from NBA Jam. So pleasant. Of course, keep it locked to SI.com for all the latest news and headlines. And follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Boom shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka. Read